Yeah. So, so first of all, like I'm going to address the second bit of your question in a second, but the first question, which you can ponder, and you can watch this back on YouTube afterwards and ponder it, is who is the one that notices the ego? So, what happens in the mind is it's always splitting in two and chatting to itself. So, there is a part of your mind which splits in two and realizes that another part of the mind is out of control and is like attacking or is saying all these words. But both of those are being watched. There is something which is witnessing both of those. And maybe you've had awakenings and maybe you deeply know this, but these talks are like a reminder and a calling to this. So there is this watching that's happening. And the watching has no thoughts. It creates thoughts, but it has no thoughts. It's still, it's present, and it's free, and it's silent. So the one that notices the part of the mind that gets lost in thoughts is part of the mind. It doesn't mean that that's wrong. Ramesh Balsekar used to split it into like working mind and thinking mind, and the thinking mind is the ego and the working mind is like the practical mind. So it doesn't mean that all thoughts are ego, but you are never found in a thought. So anyone that can register or understand something, I know that maybe doesn't feel like it, but that is part of thinking. Yeah. By it, yeah. So I'll go into that bit now. So you've got these thoughts that are speaking to itself, and who you are is this still, silent watching, which is beyond that never moves, that doesn't have a permanent thought. Thoughts come and go in it, but it doesn't have a permanent thought about itself. It's absolutely unknown. And then in that, there is this chatting, say for example, about a love relationship, about what someone does or doesn't do to you, or which is such a one. Thinking about other people can really create a lot of thoughts, because people's actions aren't a fixed thing, and the way in which you see people's actions will change dependent on your mood and your feeling. So if you feel more open, then maybe you see them in a more loving way. If you feel more insecure, maybe you need them more than another time. If you feel more fear, maybe you feel more blame or projection or anger to them to try and protect yourself from that fear. So there's all different things that can happen. Like who you see as the other person is totally dependent on the emotion that is coming. That doesn't mean that we should allow people to abuse us or do anything like that. It's it's really important to have good understanding of behavioral therapy, of the way people are behaving together. But we're not talking about that now. We're talking about that which is beyond that. And in that realm of like who is right and who is wrong, that can go on endlessly in a way. So it's who is it that is experiencing that? So what happens in the body-mind mechanism, why these thoughts become really strong, is that there's two reasons. There is the seeking dynamic that happens. So the seeking dynamic can get flared up by something. So say, for example, trying to work out who the other person is can flare up seeking, because trying to work out who the other person is a really existential idea, and you can't work out what the other person is because they don't exist. So this can send the mind crazy and create loads of fear because the mind doesn't know who the other person is and will never know who the other person is. And then that can touch on this deeper freedom of what you are, that him and you are not a fixed entity. You're not someone that is fixed. So when you try to fix someone into a behavior or into a way of being, you can't do that, and that can drive the mind into loops. However, the body and the mind aren't different. So whatever you think affects the health of the body. So the more that you get into thought loops of fear, for example, the more that you're going to affect the hormones and the nervous system in the body, and then the more that will create fearful thoughts, if you see what I mean. So it's like a loop. They keep um, uh, tripping up on each other and encouraging each other. But if it's thoughts about another person, it might be really touching on who are you and who are they, because you can
Yes,
never
but
sort out who the other person is. You can never
it's
find
crazy.
them. What you could, what you,
Yeah,
yeah, what you can do, on the human level. I know this is going to sound like a weird suggestion, but on my YouTube, no, not on my YouTube, on my website, I have a reference page, and on the reference page, there is a link to a YouTube channel called called Psychologist in Seattle, and it's Dr. Kirk Honda, and he's a relationship expert. And sometimes the mind has to understand relationships to calm down fear that happens in the body, and to actually
mhm,
be able to go down up to go beyond relationships. So
mhm,
ultimately, there are no relationships, and that is really scary. There is just action happening. But in the swimming cause and effect, your life is seemingly affected by the behaviors of other people. So understanding what people mean, their behaviors, what's a healthy way of relating, can actually settle something down so that you have the opportunity to go beyond those dynamics and see that there is nobody. Because what might be happening to you at the moment is you're having awakening experiences where you're realizing that who you're thinking about, say your friend, for example, isn't a fixed person. And then this evokes fear. And then it also taps into some trauma where you maybe weren't modeled healthy relationships as a child. And so then you begin to feel insecure on the human level, and it evokes trauma. And then you get a bit stuck in that realm and you can't go beyond that realm.